Good afternoon from the WPTV News Channel 5 and Fox 29 studios in downtown West Palm Beach. I'm Shannon Cake, breaking into programming here because a verdict has been reached in the murder trial of Casey Anthony. Anthony, naturally accused of killing her 2-year-old daughter, Kaylee. This trial going on for some almost 6 weeks now. The jury has been deliberating for some 10 hours, and just a short time ago, the press and all the parties involved were made aware that the jury had come back with a verdict. So everyone at the Orange County courthouse in the center of this state scrambling right now, awaiting the word from the jury. Judge Belvin Perry on standby, as well as all parties involved. We're headed to Jay Gray, just outside the courthouse, with the very latest from the ground there. Jay?
Good afternoon. The verdict is in the Casey Anthony murder trial. Judge Belvin Perry just 15 minutes ago alerting everyone involved that he would read that decision at 2:15 local time. So there is a scurry around the courthouse right now, a real energy. Let's take a look inside courtroom 23A right now. A live look at that courtroom, and you can see Casey Anthony's parents, George and Cindy, in their traditional seats in the last row of the courtroom viewing area, waiting to hear the verdict and what will happen with their daughter accused of killing her young 2-year-old girl. She faces 6 counts here: murder, aggravated child abuse, aggravated manslaughter of a child, and 4 counts of providing false information to law officers. The jury deliberated for just over 10 hours. They went into deliberations yesterday afternoon, worked through a lot of the judge's instructions at that time, then met this morning at 8:30 local time, Eastern time, and began their deliberations. And again, just 15 minutes ago, informed the judge that they had reached a decision on all counts, and the judge informed everyone involved with this case that he would announce that decision at 2:15 Eastern time. So we will know then the decision and Casey Anthony's fate. That's the latest from outside the courthouse here in Orlando. I'm Jay Gray. Now back to you.
Jay, thank you. We're joined now by Michelle Suskauer, our legal analyst, right here in our studios. And Michelle, you know, this really took a lot of people by surprise that this verdict came back so quickly. I heard you talking. We spoke with you earlier this week, and you had really believed your best, looking into your glass ball, was that this verdict would come maybe Thursday at the earliest.
I really thought it was going to take a whole lot longer, but it was fast. But obviously, what this shows is that this jury was on the same page. They've spent time together. They really have this common experience. And they obviously, you know, were all convinced really at the same time. They didn't ask for anything. They didn't ask for a readback.
She's talking about coming in this morning. The jury comes in this morning, meets face-to-face with Judge Belvin Perry. This is their opportunity, if you will, to ask questions, get clarification. Typically, that happens in a trial where so much is at stake.
That's right. That's right. They could have asked for any witness. If they had a question about any of the witnesses, they could ask for a readback. They could, if they want to look at any of the evidence, they want to touch things, they want to look at the photographs, the videotapes, and they really didn't. They didn't ask for anything. And so I think that's amazing.
So everybody has filed back into the courtroom now. We are waiting and watching. Some 10 minutes away now. Here's Casey Anthony.
There's Casey Anthony, and obviously what's going through her mind right now, she looks very, very upset. She's very nervous. She was not at the jail. She obviously spent the night there, but they've had her actually at the courthouse, obviously guarded, waiting, because this verdict could come back at any time, and obviously it did. It came back. And so you could see Jose Baez right now talking with Casey Anthony and probably calming her down, saying, look, whatever happens, if you're convicted, there's going to be an appeal, and we may have some very good issues on appeal. So, you know, all hope is not lost.
And there in the foreground, that's Linda Drain Burdick, who's the prosecutor, the chief prosecutor in this case. Jeff Ashton just by her side.
Cheney Mason sitting there. So you have the defense team, you have everybody there, you have the courtroom deputies, and they're just waiting to gather everybody and listen to this verdict. And what's going to happen is, first of all, a couple of things. We're going to see who, well, we haven't actually been shown the jury, but we will find out who the foreperson was of the jury, and obviously that's telling. But the fact that this happened as quickly as it did, I think probably does not bode well for Casey Anthony.
So in that vein, Michelle, you are a defense attorney. What is going through Jose Baez's mind right now? This was a lot at stake for him. I mean, a big reputation on the line. He's been on this case for 3 years. What's going through his mind right now?
Well, I think he's probably very nervous, there's so much adrenaline that's pumping. When probably one of the most exciting parts of a trial is when you hear that knock on the door and the jury has a verdict. I don't know if he actually heard the knock. I don't know if he was in the courtroom at the time, but it's nerve-wracking. And obviously, at this point, you have no idea what's happening, so you're hopeful. You're hopeful that you were able to reach this jury and either have her found not guilty, have her acquitted, or to get a lesser offense, because to get a lesser offense is still a win for the defense, because that means that her life is spared.
Let's go down what she could be getting, because it is confusing. Layman's terms, what is she facing? What could happen?
Well, the most serious charge is first-degree murder, premeditated first-degree murder, and I don't think that the jury is going to come back with that. I think that the most serious that they would come back with, which could face the same penalty, is felony murder, because I think there was an easier way for the jury to get there other than premeditated first-degree murder. And she could still face either life in prison or the death penalty. And in Florida, life in prison is life in prison. It's not 15 to life. There's no parole in Florida. So if you are sentenced to life, you spend the rest of your life in prison. You die in prison.
And then, of course, there are those 4 counts of providing false information to law enforcement officers.
Right, and she will be found guilty of that, because basically the defense conceded. They agreed. She did lie to law enforcement. No one said she did not lie to law enforcement. Matter of fact, that was really one of the cornerstones of the defense case, is that she lied. That's what she did, and so that she will be found guilty of
and
that.
Jose Baez, like you said, made that a cornerstone of his case, saying the whole family lies. It's a family that lies all the time, and so what else would you expect from Casey Anthony?
That's
was
right.
his argument.
That was what they were trying to do, to explain away the 31 days that she did not notify anyone that her child was missing. Meanwhile, her child was not missing. Her child was murdered.
Jose Baez, some really, really powerful statements in closing arguments yesterday. He said, quote, "How can you say that it was proven beyond a reasonable doubt?" Those are some lingering words that I imagine that the jury would really have to wrestle with. He said, how? I don't see how you can say this was proven beyond a reasonable doubt.
And that's what he needed to do. He did not have a lot to work with, but he needed to wave that flag, and he needed to make sure that the jury understood, and that everyone in that courtroom understood, everyone watching, that the prosecution has 100% of the burden of proof here, and that they did not prove their case. And here they are, we're talking about the prosecution, and there's the prosecution right there, and they're waiting, and nervous as well. Remember, everyone here has worked so hard. They worked so hard. They have done absolutely nothing else. They're living and breathing this case.
And this, let's be honest about this too, Michelle. I mean, the eyes, not just of our country, but of the world, have been on this case. I heard you talking yesterday, and you said law students will be studying this case for years to come.
They will.
So the reputation of the state prosecutor in this state is really on the line here, is it not?
It is, and it's really, our entire criminal justice system has really been under a microscope. I think this has really been an amazing opportunity for people to see how trials work. This is not a usual trial. This is a very unusual trial. But I think Judge Belvin Perry did a phenomenal, phenomenal job. He's the chief judge in that circuit, and he was in complete control.
Exactly.
We certainly know that by that waiter from TGI Fridays, who said probably serving the rest of his 6 days in jail because he made an obscene gesture at one of the prosecutors. But this judge knew the law, he held everybody's feet to the fire, and he moved this case along.
Once again, this is Linda Drain Burdick there on the left in the red, and that is Jeff Ashton to her right, partners in terms of the prosecution on this.
And you know what, Shannon, very different styles. We saw very different styles that they had. I think Jeff Ashton was more emotional. Obviously, sometimes he could not control his emotions because he was berated for actually, and there's George and Cindy Anthony. You can't really see Cindy. You haven't really been able to see her too much throughout this. Her head is down a lot, and I think on purpose.
Sure.
You can't even, how could anyone imagine what they're going through right now?
Well, it's unspeakable, really. You're a mother of the person who's on trial, and you are the grandmother.
And how about George Anthony?
Sure.
So not only did he lose his granddaughter, he basically has no relationship with his daughter, and he was thrown under the bus by the defense, which he may have paid for part of the defense.
Oh, let me ask you about that. I mean, there were a lot of accusations of claims and allegations made by the defense in this case in terms of ruining reputations. How ethical is that? And where is the line in terms of building a case and then making these allegations against family members that could very likely stick? I mean, we've heard about Casey Anthony being perhaps the most hated woman in America, and George Anthony probably is not too far behind based on some of the allegations from the defense.
Well, you know, again, what I had said before is that we're not privy to conversations that happen between Casey Anthony and her attorneys. And if she says this is what happened, they have no other statements that to disbelieve it, that I was abused and this is the reason why. Well, we're not in the judging business as defense lawyers. That's not what we do. We have to vigorously and ethically represent our client, and we're not there to judge them. However, you do have an ethical obligation to not throw out information that is going to be inflammatory just for the purpose of being inflammatory. And that's what happened with some of this, and we're watching Casey right now. And
you know, in listening to some of Linda Drain Burdick's closing arguments yesterday, she made the case. Look, Casey Anthony had access to every single piece of evidence in this case, almost making this undeniable case closed statement to the jurors. And is that what you think they went back with, and that's why we're seeing such a rapid fire decision right now?
I think that the defense made promises that they could not keep, and that even though this is a circumstantial case, because the state, there was no one who saw this child murdered, there was no confession to it, no DNA. Even so, all of the pieces may have been just so overwhelming for the defense to overcome. And so that's and then the way that Linda Burdick left the jury, the very last thing that this jury saw, do you remember, were two photographs of Casey Anthony partying and of that tattoo.
Sure.
And a picture really is worth 1,000 words.
And she said, whose life is more important? Right. And here's your answer. And she showed the picture of Casey dancing. Whose life was better? Whose life was better as a result of this child being out of the picture? Was it Cindy Anthony? No. Was it George Anthony who tried to kill himself? Or was it Casey Anthony who, when this child was gone, was partying and getting a tattoo? Is that what was so unforgivable, do you think, in the jurors' minds? I mean, that's almost, besides the lying that was on tape, and the jailhouse banters between her parents, where she absolutely denied that the child drowned, that Kaylee drowned, to her mother's face. So all that lying kind of deep-seated in the jurors' minds. But was it the 31 days that was kind of, I mean, for a mom, you can't even imagine. 31 days, if my child was gone for 31 seconds, I would be screaming Amber Alert, okay? But I think that is very tough. But again, we're making, I don't want to make an assumption that it's going to be felony murder, which, but this jury may not want her to leave prison. They may want her to be found guilty of aggravated manslaughter of a child, aggravated child abuse. We're going to see something that is going to ensure that she spends a considerable amount of time in prison, whether it's life in prison or something less. But I don't think that with all of this evidence, this jury is going to let her walk. I can't see that happen. So much talk about the great job that Linda Burdick did yesterday in closing and then in rebuttal. There was a lot made of, well, I heard it a few times yesterday, the computer searches. That was another pivotal point in this trial. The neck breaking and the chloroform searches done from the home computer. In March, and this child was not killed until June. That does show, if the jury believes it, premeditation. That's where they hang their hat, on that premeditation. So that's where the premeditation would come in, right there. I think that that's the strongest evidence that the state has for premeditation. Do you think that's the hiccup in the case, or how strong is that? I think it's incredibly strong, because you had Cindy Anthony come on the stand and said, I did those internet searches. Maybe she also thought, here, okay, so everyone's standing, the judge is coming on right now. Okay, we're going to listen in now to the courtroom in Orange County.
You may be seated. Let the record reflect that the defendant is present along with counsel for the defendant. Both sides ready to proceed. It's been brought to my attention that the jury has reached a verdict. State?
The state's ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Defense?
Defense is ready.
To those in the gallery, please do not express any signs of approval or disapproval upon the reading of the verdict. Let's return to jury.